Hi, I'm Alex Maple from RBR. I'm an associate and it's great to speak to you today. Right now we're going to be talking about opportunities in Latin America. Now let's take a look at this first slide. There's quite a few data points and I'm not going to spend too much time going over each of these. Lots of different themes going on across the region. So lots of people who don't have bank accounts who are going to enter the banking system as time goes on. Lots of countries with certain security worries, but generally speaking, cash use is strong and in many markets it's growing. Now, for various reasons, including particularly cash, we're going to focus on three markets that we think have the most opportunities, and those are Argentina, Ecuador, and also Mexico. We can see there from the first slide that Argentina has very high cash usage per ATM, but both Ecuador and Mexico, they both have a high number of ATMs, ATMs per people, high number of branches per people as well, and we expect that to continue being quite strong. Mexico, very low banked population, about 50%, and we expect a lot more people in that country to enter the banking system over the next few years. And also, the banked population is also a relevant factor in relation to Ecuador as well. That figure looks a bit high compared to Mexico, but as we'll come on to, that banked population figure might perhaps be misleading. So let's go on to talk about Argentina first off. And there's a lot of potential opportunity for IADs deploying in off-site locations. And why is that? Well, one of the interesting things about Argentina, of course, is the economic situation. And it's a situation with a lot of inflation. It's a very high inflationary environment. And this means that cash replenishment is quite expensive. So it's very important when we talk about the low share of ATMs which are located off-site, and when we talk about the potential for IAD expansion in the market, that cash replenishment is a key point here. So it really does point to a situation where market entrants who have specialty in cash replenishment and making cash replenishment more efficient, there's some opportunities for them as well as of course opportunities for IAD deployment more generally. Now, the largest IAD, Cajero Express, accounts for about 75% of ATMs that are deployed by IADs, and they've actually installed their first recycler as well. So in a sense, you can see that the market is gearing up potentially to see more recyclers being deployed in future. And of course, the more recyclers you have, the more efficient your cash management is, because of course some of those ATMs can be restocked by those notes that are being deposited automatically in the ATM. So what opportunities are there for TecBan? Well, TecBan could provide services as part of managed services or bank branding arrangements, helping banks to expand their presence in a cost-effective way to parts of the country that are away from branches or urban areas. Of course, it would have to pay attention to the high inflation environment and costs, but given that it does have experience in providing services in an efficient way, that could be something that it could surmount and get over. So the opportunities are related to cash replenishment, IAD ATMs, recyclers, and also bank branch sharing, because as we've seen, because costs are such an issue, it's entirely possible that banks will want to minimize costs not only in terms of the operation of their ATMs and providing cash to their customers, but also when it comes to bank branches as well. So that's Argentina. Let's move on to Ecuador. Now I just want to cover that point I mentioned earlier on about the banked population. Yes, it's actually not too low compared to some of the other markets in Latin America. But what's interesting to understand is that a lot of the debit cards that people do have are not used for making payments at POS. Most of the time, the debit cards in the market are used just at the ATM to remove cash from machines. So that's worth bearing in mind. There's still a lot of demand for cash. Now, urban areas, well, the coverage of ATMs in those areas isn't too bad. It's pretty good. But it's in the rural areas where the opportunities are. Yes, there are some cooperatives, and there's actually one large cooperative with about 700 ATMs. that does cater for a number of people in those off-site areas, but there aren't any IADs in Ecuador, and we think that part of the reason for that is because actually there are areas of the country which are quite difficult to access and quite difficult for deployers to install machines in. And that's because a lot of the area is difficult terrain, it's jungle, it's mountains, it's away from the coast. And because of that, I think some IAD operators are perhaps wary of putting machines there. But of course, TecBan does have experience in putting machines in Brazil in less populated areas, and so that could potentially be an opportunity. The other thing about Ecuador is that we do expect the number of ATMs and branches to go up quite a lot, and that's reflected in our shipments data, which suggests that there's a lot of shipments to that country, proportionately speaking. And in addition to that, there's actually a lot of automated deposit ATMs in the country compared to other markets in the region. So that's a lot of recyclers and a lot of shipments, and we do expect the share of ATMs in the market that are located off-site to grow. So what can TecBan do in this situation? Well, banks could increase their off-site presence via TecBan using bank-branded IAD ATMs. Managed services agreements, for example, could be good for banks because it would make ATM deployment more cost-effective and the costs more predictable. And of course, it could involve recycling, given that use of recycling in the country is beginning to become established. In addition to that, TecBan could provide other services as well in relation to cash replenishment, to help with making things more efficient, and of course to help with things like security. It could, like with Argentina, it could be a direct participant, or it could help those companies and banks and others in the country on an advisory or consultancy basis. And that brings us to the third of the countries that we're going to be looking at in more detail, Mexico. And Mexico perhaps provides the greatest opportunity. It has a very large number of people, it's a wide area, it's a big country, cash use very, very strong. It's also a country where the banked population is quite low, about 50%. And what this suggests is that in the future, we can expect more people entering the banking system, and they'll be wanting to use their debit cards to go straight to the ATM and remove their funds via those machines. Now, looking at it a bit more specifically, there is an IAD present, Cardtronics. And what's interesting about Cardtronics is that their ATMs are bank branded, so they already carry bank branding on the machines. And this suggests that the idea of banks having their brand on these IAD machines is already well established, and so that could help market entrants who want to enter the country and provide those services to banks, where banks can perhaps have their brand on a machine, reducing the costs that banks have to pay if they were going to deploy those ATMs themselves. Now, a lot of the Cardtronics machines that are currently in the market are based in, things like places like tourist areas, nightclubs, that kind of place. But still, the potential for deployment by IADs in other areas is still very strong. Perhaps one of the most important reasons why Mexico offers an opportunity for certain market entrants is security. Security is one of the key issues with Mexico. There are people who are scared of going outside to withdraw funds from the ATM, given the various issues. It's a bit like Brazil. So that very much suggests that market entrants with expertise in security could find potential in that market, either directly through ATM deployment or through consultancy projects where they help local deployers become a bit more confident in deploying in non-branch areas. Now, there's also a lot of shipments, but a large share of shipments are actually recyclers. So it suggests that banks in Mexico are trying to think of ways of reducing costs. And talking about that, one of the other things that banks in Mexico have done is actually strike agreements with each other, whereby the customers of one bank can use the ATMs of another bank, but pay lower fees in a sort of reciprocal arrangement where customers can visit different ATMs and pay less to withdraw funds. And that suggests that banks, again, they're trying to reduce costs. And so whether it's through recyclers and whether it's through these sharing agreements, and whether it's through perhaps having these bank branding deals with IADs, it looks like banks in Mexico are conscious of wanting to reduce costs that they're paying in these particular areas. So what does that mean for TecBan? Well, of course, TecBan has a lot of knowledge when it comes to cash, when it comes to recycling, when it comes to IAD deployment, and also when it comes to security. So this suggests that whether it's via a direct intervention in the market, by being a direct participant, or whether it's through consultancy services, helping existing market players to make their operations better, it suggests that there is opportunity there for those companies that do have the sort of relevant expertise. So those are the three countries that we've looked at in Latin America. As I said, quite a few interesting themes across the region when it comes to demand for cash, security, banked population, etc. So I hope you enjoyed that look, and thanks very much.